The first thing I became aware of was the sterile smell of antiseptic mingling with something floral. Lilies, perhaps. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, as though weighted down by stones, and when I finally managed to pry them open, the fluorescent lights above me burned like small suns. I squeezed them shut again immediately, a sharp pain lancing through my temples. "She's waking up." The voice was unfamiliar. Female. Professional. A nurse, maybe. I tried again, more slowly this time, allowing my eyes to adjust to the brightness. White ceiling tiles came into focus, then the pale green curtain hanging beside what I assumed was my bed. Hospital. I was in a hospital. But why? I attempted to move my arms, and found them surprisingly weak, my muscles protesting even the smallest movement. "Faith, can you hear me?" Another voice, this one belonging to a doctor, judging by the white coat that entered my peripheral vision. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Morrison. You're at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. You've been in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks following a severe car accident." Car accident. The words should have triggered something: fear, recognition, memory. But there was only emptiness where those feelings should be. I opened my mouth to speak, and my voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What happened?" Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair beside my bed, his expression carefully neutral in that way doctors have when they're about to deliver difficult news. "Your vehicle went off the road upstate. You sustained significant head trauma and several broken bones. We had to keep you sedated to allow the swelling in your brain to reduce. The good news is that physically, you're healing remarkably well." "And the bad news?" I managed, my throat dry and scratchy. He hesitated, exchanging a glance with the nurse before returning his attention to me. "You've experienced what we call retrograde amnesia. Based on our assessments, you appear to have lost approximately 3 years of memories. Everything before that seems intact. Your childhood, your education, your early career as an architect. But the past 3 years are essentially blank. 3 years. Gone. Just like that." I tried to access those memories, to pull them from whatever dark corner of my mind they'd been locked away in. But it was like reaching into fog. There was nothing there. No shape or substance to grasp onto. Panic began to rise in my chest, my breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "Try to stay calm," the nurse said, adjusting something on the IV pole beside me. "Stress will only make things worse. Memory loss following head trauma isn't uncommon, and in many cases, memories do return, though it can take time." "How much time?" I asked, hating the desperate edge in my voice. "There's no way to predict that, I'm afraid," Dr. Morrison replied. "It could be days, weeks, months. Some memories may return in full, others only partially, and some—" He paused, clearly reluctant to finish the thought. "Some may not return at all. But we'll work with you, provide therapy and support. You won't be facing this alone." "Alone?" The word struck me oddly. Do I have family? Friends? Even as I asked, I realized I could remember my parents, but they'd passed away years ago. I'd been 23, fresh out of graduate school. Before these missing 3 years. "There's someone here to see you, actually," the nurse said, her tone taking on a strange quality I couldn't quite identify. "He's been here every day since you were admitted. Wouldn't leave, actually. We finally had to set up a cot in the waiting room for him." "Who?" I asked, though something in my chest tightened with an emotion I couldn't name. The doctor and nurse exchanged another look, and I was beginning to find that habit irritating. "Your husband," Dr. Morrison said finally. "Francesco Castellano. He's the one who found you after the accident and called for help. Likely saved your life." "Husband." The word ricocheted through my mind, seeking purchase and finding none. I wasn't married. I would remember getting married, wouldn't I? That was the kind of thing that stayed with you, that marked your memory indelibly. Except apparently not if you lost 3 years of your life. I want to see him, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Maybe seeing him would trigger something, unlock whatever door was keeping my memories prisoner. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. Of course. But Faith, I should prepare you. Your husband is a very prominent figure in New York. There are certain security concerns, which is why we've had you in this private wing. I want you to take things slowly, not overwhelm yourself. Security concerns? What did that even mean? But before I could ask, the doctor was already standing, nodding to the nurse to follow him out. I'll send him in. Just remember, take your time. There's no rush to remember everything at once. They left me alone with my racing thoughts and the steady beep of the heart monitor beside me. I looked down at my hands, really seeing them for the first time. There were small scars on my knuckles that I didn't remember getting, and on my left hand, a platinum wedding band with an enormous diamond that caught the light when I moved my fingers. It was beautiful, elegant, clearly expensive. Not the sort of ring I ever imagined wearing. But then again, I couldn't imagine being married at all. The door opened, and I looked up, my breath catching in my throat. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, full lips. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Deep brown, almost black, they held an intensity that made me feel like I was being seen right down to my bones. He wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the top buttons undone, revealing a glimpse of olive skin and what might have been the edge of a tattoo. Faith. My name on his lips was like a prayer and a possession all at once. His accent was distinct, Italian, with a richness that suggested education and refinement. He moved toward me with controlled urgency, stopping just short of my bed, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides as though he was physically restraining himself from reaching for me. You don't remember me, he said, and it wasn't a question. Pain flickered across his features, quickly masked. The doctors said you might not. I'm sorry, I whispered, and I genuinely was, though I couldn't have said why. Something about the anguish in his eyes called to something deep within me, something that felt like recognition, even if my mind couldn't provide the context. He pulled the chair closer and sat down, keeping a careful distance between us. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. His voice was rough with emotion. I'm Francesco, your husband of 2 years, and before you ask, yes, we were very much in love, are very much in love, at least on my side. Tell me, I said, needing something, anything to fill the void where my memories should be. Tell me about us, about me, about who I was, who I am. Francesco leaned back in the chair, his eyes never leaving my face, as though he was trying to memorize every detail. You are brilliant, an architect, one of the best in the city. You designed 3 buildings in Manhattan that changed the skyline. You have this way of seeing spaces, of understanding how people move through them. That's almost intuitive. When you talk about your work, your whole face lights up. I tried to imagine it, to feel some connection to the person he was describing. But she felt like a stranger. How did we meet? A slight smile touched his lips, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. At a gallery opening in Soho. You were there with a client, I was there for business. You were wearing a green dress that matched your eyes, and you were arguing passionately with the gallery owner about the spatial flow of the exhibit. I was captivated. I introduced myself, and you looked at me like you could see right through every polished layer to whatever truth was underneath. And then what? And then you told me I had the posture of someone who was used to getting their way, and that you found it both arrogant and oddly compelling. The smile widened slightly. You've never been one to mince words, Faith. It's one of the things I love most about you. There was something in the way he spoke, in the careful cadence of his words, that made me think he was choosing what to tell me, editing some larger story. What aren't you telling me? His expression shuddered slightly, a wariness entering those dark eyes. You're perceptive. That hasn't changed. Francesco. I was surprised by the firmness in my voice. I may not remember the last 3 years, but I'm not stupid. The doctor mentioned security concerns. There's been a guard outside my door since I woke up, so tell me the truth. What am I not remembering? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his hands. When he looked back up, there was a resolve in his eyes that told me I was about to hear something that would change everything. My family, the Castellanos, were one of the oldest and most powerful families in New York. We have legitimate business interests, real estate, import-export, several restaurants. But we also have interests that exist in the shadows. I am what you might call a businessman with connections to organizations that operate outside the law. The Sicilian family. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Mafia. He was telling me, in carefully chosen words, that he was part of the mafia. And apparently, I had married him knowing this. You're saying I married a criminal, I said flatly, trying to process this information. I'm saying you married me knowing exactly who and what I am, he corrected, his voice steady. I never lied to you, Faith. I told you the truth on our 3rd date, gave you every opportunity to walk away. But you didn't. You said you loved me for who I was, not in spite of it. You said everyone has shadows, and mine were just more visible than most. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man before me with the life he was describing. And the accident? Was it really an accident? His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. We're still investigating. But there are people who would be happy to hurt me by hurting you. That's why there's security. Why you'll have guards when you leave here. I won't take chances with your life. Not again. Not again, I repeated, catching on the words. Meaning, this has happened before? Threats? Yes. This is the first time anyone has gotten close enough to actually hurt you. The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. And it's my greatest failure. I promised to protect you, and I failed. Looking at him, at the genuine anguish in his expression, I felt something shift inside me. I didn't remember him, didn't remember our life together. But I could see clearly that his feelings were real. Whatever we had been to each other, it had mattered. It still mattered, at least to him. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now you heal. You come home when the doctors clear you, and you decide if you want to try to remember, or if you want to start fresh. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. But Faith, whatever you decide, know this. I will keep you safe. Whether you remember me or not, whether you choose to stay or go, I will protect you. That's not negotiable. There was something almost frightening in his certainty, in the absolute conviction with which he spoke. This was a man who was used to controlling situations, to bending the world to his will. And yet, there was also a vulnerability there, a crack in the armor where I could see how much this was costing him. I don't know who I am anymore, I admitted, my voice breaking slightly. I don't know this woman who fell in love with a mafia boss, who designed buildings and lived in this dangerous world. I don't know if I can be her again." Francesco reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand in his. His touch was warm, his palm slightly calloused in a way that surprised me. "Then we'll figure out together who you want to be now. No pressure, no expectations. Just truth and time, and whatever this is between us that transcended memory." 5 days later, Dr. Morrison cleared me for discharge, though with a long list of instructions and warnings. The physical injuries were healing well. The broken ribs would take another few weeks, and I'd need physical therapy for my leg. But the amnesia remained stubbornly intact. I'd undergone countless cognitive tests, spoken with a neuropsychologist, and tried every mental exercise they suggested, but the past 3 years remained locked away, inaccessible. Francesco had visited every day, sometimes for hours, telling me stories about our life together. He was careful, measured in what he shared, and I got the sense he was still protecting me from something. But I was learning about the woman I'd been, or at least the version of her that he chose to present. According to him, I'd been fearless, passionate about my work, and surprisingly comfortable in his dangerous world. I'd befriended the wives of his associates, learned basic Italian to speak with his Sicilian relatives, and even accompanied him to business meetings where my architectural eye helped with real estate acquisitions. It painted a picture of someone I didn't recognize, someone far braver and more adaptable than I felt now. The discharge process took most of the morning, with nurses going over medication schedules and therapy appointments. Francesco had arranged everything, from the private medical transport to the 24-hour nursing care I'd have at home. At home. The concept felt abstract, unreal. When we finally left the hospital, I was shocked by the security presence. 2 large men in dark suits flanked us as we exited through a side entrance, and a black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. Another vehicle idled behind it, presumably carrying additional security. "Is this really necessary?" I asked as Francesco helped me into the back seat, his hand steady on my elbow. "Yes," he said simply, settling in beside me. "You were hurt once. I won't allow it to happen again." The drive through Manhattan was surreal. I recognized the city, of course, the towering buildings, the constant motion of traffic and pedestrians, the unique energy that was quintessentially New York. But I didn't recognize my place in it. Where was my apartment? Where did I work? Did I still have an office somewhere? Or had that life been put on hold during these lost 3 years? We drove north, eventually turning onto Fifth Avenue. My confusion must have shown on my face because Francesco said quietly, "We live on the Upper East Side, penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. You chose it, actually. Said it had the perfect light for your drafting table." The building, when we arrived, was exactly what I'd expected. Pre-war architecture, discreet elegance, a doorman who nodded respectfully as we entered. "Welcome home, Mrs. Castellano," he said, and hearing that name attached to me sent a jolt through my system. The elevator was private, requiring a key card to access. As it rose smoothly toward the top floor, I found my heart racing. What would I find in this apartment? What pieces of my lost life would be waiting there? The doors opened directly into the penthouse, and I stepped into a space that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Central Park. The autumn trees a riot of gold and crimson. The apartment was decorated with a mix of modern and classic Italian pieces, creating an atmosphere that was both sophisticated and surprisingly warm. There were books everywhere, on shelves, stacked on tables, even piled beside a leather armchair near the window, and on the walls, framed architectural drawings that I somehow knew, instinctively, were mine. "You spent weeks getting the design just right," Francesco said, watching me take it all in. "Worked with the contractors personally on every detail. You said a home should be a sanctuary, especially in our world." I walked slowly through the living room, running my fingers along the back of a velvet sofa, pausing to examine the drawings on the walls. They were good, technically precise, but with an artistic flair that elevated them beyond mere blueprints. Had I really created these? This woman who had lost 3 years seemed to have gained so much in that time. A husband, a home, a confidence in her work that I wasn't sure I'd possessed before. "Would you like to see your studio?" Francesco asked. "You use the second bedroom as your office. Said the light there was perfect for afternoon drafting sessions." I nodded, following him down a hallway lined with photographs. I paused at one. Francesco and me on what looked like a terrace somewhere warm. The Mediterranean, perhaps. I was laughing, my hair wind-blown, and he was looking at me with an expression of such open adoration that it made my chest ache. We looked happy. We looked in love. "Positano," he said, stopping beside me. "Our honeymoon. You said you'd never seen water that blue, never tasted wine that made you feel like you were drinking sunshine. We stayed for 2 weeks, and you sketched constantly. The villa was a 16th century building, and you were fascinated by how it had been renovated over the centuries. I tried to remember it, tried to feel the warmth of that sun or taste that wine, but there was nothing. Just this photograph of 2 strangers who wore our faces. The studio was exactly as he'd described, a bright, airy room with drafting tables, shelves of architecture books and material samples, and a large bulletin board covered in sketches and notes. But what caught my attention was the wall opposite the windows. It was covered in photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings, all connected by colored string in a pattern that looked like something from a detective's investigation board. "What is that?" I asked, moving closer to examine it. Francesco's expression darkened. "That's your investigation, the one you were conducting before the accident." I looked at the board more carefully. There were photographs of men I didn't recognize, documents that appeared to be financial records, newspaper clippings about various criminal proceedings. And in the center of it all, a photograph of a man with cold blue eyes and a cruel smile. Someone had drawn a red X over his face. "Who is he?" I asked, though something about that photograph made my skin crawl. "Viktor Kozlov, Russian arms dealer and human trafficker. He's also the man who tried to kill you." Francesco's voice was hard, dangerous. "And before you ask, yes, this was all your idea. You found out what he was doing, the trafficking, the weapons, the drugs, and you decided you wanted to help stop him." I turned to stare at him. "Why would I do that? I'm an architect, not some vigilante." "Because that's who you are, Faith. Who you've always been." He moved to stand beside me, looking at the board with an expression that mixed pride and pain. "You told me once that you didn't choose to fall in love with someone in my world, but since you were there anyway, you might as well use your position to do some good. You used your architectural connections, your access to my business networks, to gather intelligence. You became an asset to not just my organization, but to several law enforcement agencies who were trying to build cases against the worst of the worst." This was insane. The woman he was describing sounded like someone from a movie, not a real person. Certainly not me. "And this Kozlov, he found out what I was doing?" "We think so. The accident happened while you were driving back from a meeting with one of your contacts upstate. Your car went off the road on a particularly treacherous stretch. The brake lines had been cut." My blood ran cold. "So it wasn't an accident at all. Someone tried to murder me." "Yes," Francesco said simply. "And they very nearly succeeded." I sank into the chair by the drafting table, my legs suddenly unsteady. "Why didn't you tell me this in the hospital?" "Because you'd just woken up from a coma with 3 years of your life missing. I thought you deserved a chance to adjust before learning that someone had tried to kill you and might try again." He crouched down in front of me, his eyes intense. "But I won't lie to you, Faith. Not about this. You're in danger, and you need to know what you're facing." "How can I face something I don't remember? How can I protect myself from an enemy I don't even know?" The frustration in my voice was palpable. You don't have to remember to be safe. That's what I'm here for. That's what the security team is for. He took my hands in his grip firm and warm. But I also know you, even if you don't remember yourself. You're not someone who hides in the shadows. You'll want to understand what happened, to try to remember. And when you do, I'll be here to help you. I looked at our joined hands, at the matching wedding bands we wore. How did we end up here? How did a relationship between an architect and a... I hesitated, not sure how to finish the sentence. A mafia boss? He supplied with a slight smile. A lot of late-night conversations, a lot of honesty, and a recognition that what we had was rare enough to be worth the risk. You told me once that safety was an illusion, that anyone could be hurt at any time by any number of things. At least with me, you knew exactly what the dangers were. There was a certain honesty in that. That sounds like something someone would say to justify a terrible decision, I said, but without real heat. Perhaps. Or perhaps it was the most honest thing either of us had ever said. He stood, releasing my hands. You must be exhausted. Let me show you our bedroom, and you can rest. We can explore more later. Our bedroom. The words sent a flutter of nervous energy through me. I'd been so focused on the larger implications of my situation that I hadn't really considered the intimate details. This man was my husband. We shared a bed, a life, presumably an intimate relationship that I had no memory of. He must have seen something in my expression because he said quickly, I've set up the guest room for myself. I won't push you into anything you're not comfortable with, Faith. Memory or no memory, your comfort and consent are paramount. The relief I felt was mixed with something else, something that might have been disappointment, though I couldn't have said why. The master bedroom was stunning. A large space with those same floor-to-ceiling windows, a king-sized bed with luxurious linens, and doors that opened onto a private terrace. There were personal touches everywhere. A stack of architecture magazines on one nightstand, a collection of vintage cameras on a shelf, had I been a photographer, framed photographs of us together in various locations. This is a lot to take in, I admitted, standing in the middle of the room and slowly turning to take it all in. I know, and I'm not expecting you to process it all at once. Francesco moved to the closet, emerging with a soft-looking robe. Why don't you take a shower, change into something comfortable? Your nurse, Maria, will be here soon to help with your medications and check your vitals, and I'll have dinner prepared for whenever you're hungry. He left me alone, closing the door quietly behind him, and I stood there for a long moment, trying to reconcile everything I'd learned. This apartment, this life, this dangerous world. They all felt like they belonged to someone else. But they didn't. They were mine. I had chosen this, chosen him, chosen to be brave enough to love someone whose life existed in shades of gray. The question was, could I choose it again? Could I become that fearless woman who had investigated arms dealers and married a mafia boss? Or was she lost along with my memories, leaving only this uncertain, frightened version of myself? I moved to the window, looking out over the park. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere out there was a man who wanted me dead, who had already tried once to kill me. And somewhere in my locked-away memories was the reason why, the information I'd uncovered that had made me a target. I touched my reflection in the glass, studying the face that looked back at me. Green eyes, still bruised underneath from the accident. Dark hair that needed washing. Scars I didn't remember getting. Who was I? Who had I been? And more importantly, who did I want to be now? The door opened behind me, and I turned to see a pleasant-looking woman in scrubs entering with a medical bag. Mrs. Castellano, I'm Maria, your nurse. How are you feeling? I considered the question. How was I feeling? Overwhelmed, confused, scared. But also, beneath all that, something else. A spark of something that might have been curiosity or determination, or perhaps the first stirring of the courage that Francesco insisted I possessed. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But I think I'm ready to find out. Maria smiled. That's a good place to start. Now let's check those vitals and make sure you're healing properly. Then you can rest. Tomorrow will be here soon enough, and with it, new opportunities to rediscover who you are. As she went about her work, I found my gaze drawn back to the window, to the city sprawling below us. 3 years of my life were gone, locked away behind walls my mind had constructed. But those years had shaped me, changed me, made me into someone who was apparently brave enough to face danger for what she believed in. Maybe, just maybe, some of that bravery had survived the accident. Maybe some essential part of that woman was still in here, waiting to be rediscovered. And maybe in trying to find her, I'd discover whether Francesco Castellano was truly my husband and protector, or something far more dangerous, a beautiful lie wrapped around a terrible truth. The days began to blur into a routine that felt both foreign and strangely comfortable. I woke each morning in the master bedroom, the sunlight streaming through those massive windows, and for a few disoriented moments, I'd forget everything. The accident, the amnesia, the dangerous world I'd apparently chosen to inhabit. Then reality would settle back in, heavy and insistent. Maria arrived each morning at 8 to check my vitals and administer medications. She was efficient but kind, with a maternal warmth that made me feel safe. Francesco was always awake before me, usually in his home office handling what he carefully termed business matters. We'd have breakfast together on the terrace when the weather permitted, and he'd tell me more stories about our life, carefully measured doses of information that he clearly believed I could handle. I learned that I'd designed a community center in Brooklyn that served at-risk youth, that I spoke passable Italian and could curse fluently in Sicilian, that I had a weakness for good wine and old movies. I learned that Francesco and I had met his family in Sicily 6 months after our wedding, that his mother had loved me immediately, declaring I had the spirit of a Sicilian woman despite my American upbringing. But what fascinated me more than these curated stories was what I observed. The way Francesco's men spoke to him with a mixture of respect and wariness, the phone calls he took behind closed doors, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that sent chills down my spine. The way he moved through the world with absolute confidence, as though he'd never encountered a situation he couldn't control. Except, I was beginning to realize, he couldn't control this. He couldn't make me remember, couldn't force my mind to unlock its secrets. And that frustrated him, even though he tried to hide it. It was during my second week home that I decided to explore the studio more thoroughly. Francesco had encouraged it, saying that sometimes familiar spaces could trigger memories. Maria had cleared me for light activity as long as I didn't overdo it, so I spent an afternoon going through drawers and portfolios, examining the work I'd created during those lost years. The designs were impressive, more confident and innovative than anything I remembered creating before. There was a residential building in Chelsea with a green roof and solar panels, designed to be both luxurious and sustainable. A renovation of a historic theater in Harlem that preserved its Art Deco heritage while modernizing the infrastructure. And sketches, so many sketches, for what looked like a massive project, something that would transform an entire block. But it was the investigation board that drew me back, again and again. I'd studied it for hours over the past few days, trying to make sense of the connections I'd apparently made. Viktor Kozlov was at the center, but there were other names, other faces. Russian, Italian, Irish, a whole network of criminal enterprises that seemed to overlap and interconnect in ways I was only beginning to understand. I was so absorbed in studying a series of financial documents that I didn't hear Francesco enter until he spoke. "You've been in here for 3 hours. Maria is concerned you're overdoing it." I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. He'd changed since this morning, now wearing dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, less formal than the suits he usually favored. "I'm fine, just trying to understand what I was working on." He moved into the room, his eyes going to the investigation board. "You were building a case, using your access to my world and your contacts in legitimate business to track money flows, property transactions, anything that could help law enforcement build a RICO case against Kozlov and his organization." "Why?" I asked, turning back to the board. "Why would I risk my life for this?" Francesco was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Because you saw what he was doing, the women and children he was trafficking, the weapons he was selling that ended up in war zones, killing innocents, and you decided you couldn't look away. You told me that loving me meant accepting my world, but it didn't mean accepting all of it, that there were lines even you wouldn't let blur." I traced my fingers over a photograph of young women, barely more than teenagers, their eyes hollow and afraid. Evidence photos from a trafficking case, according to the notation I'd written. "And you let me do this, knowing it put me in danger?" "I tried to stop you," he admitted. "We had more than one argument about it. You told me I didn't get to decide what risks you took, that you were your own person and you'd chosen to fight this battle. Eventually, I realized the only thing worse than supporting you would be losing you by trying to control you." There was something in his voice, a pain that went deeper than just the recent accident. I turned to study him, really look at him for the first time since entering the room. He looked tired, I realized. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in the set of his shoulders. "You're not sleeping." A slight smile touched his lips. "Neither are you. I hear you wandering the apartment at night." "How would you know that if you're in the guest room?" "Because I listen. Because every sound you make, every movement, I'm aware of it. Because the thought of something happening to you while I'm down the hall, even with all the security measures, terrifies me." The raw honesty in his words made my breath catch. "Francesco—" "No, let me finish." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. "I know you don't remember me, don't remember us, and I know that makes the situation complicated, uncomfortable even. But you should know that I am completely, irrevocably in love with you. Not with the idea of you, not with who you were before the accident, but with who you are. Stubborn, brilliant, courageous, and yes, sometimes frustratingly independent. That hasn't changed just because your memories have." I found myself unable to look away from his eyes, dark and intense, and full of an emotion that made my heart race. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled at me in ways I didn't fully understand. Was this what I'd felt before? Was this the attraction that had made me willing to risk everything? "I feel it too," I admitted quietly. "Not memories, but something. When you're near, when you look at me like that, my body remembers, even if my mind doesn't." He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my cheek in his hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough, and the touch sent electricity through me. "Your body is wiser than your mind sometimes. It knows what your conscious thought is still trying to process. And what is it trying to tell me? That you're safe with me, that I would die before I let anyone hurt you again, that what we have is rare and worth fighting for." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, a feather-light touch that made me shiver. "But I won't push, Faith. You need time, space to figure out who you want to be now. I can give you that, even if it kills me to keep my distance." Before I could respond, before I could even fully process what I was feeling, his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, glancing at the screen, and his expression darkened immediately. "I need to take this. It's about Kozlov." He stepped out into the hallway, and I heard his voice drop to that dangerous quiet. I tried not to eavesdrop, but the apartment was large and voices carried. I caught fragments. Not acceptable. Handle it personally. No, I don't care what it costs. When he returned, his face was a mask of controlled fury. There's been a development. Kozlov's people have been asking questions about you, trying to find out if you're recovering, if you remember anything. Fear spiked through me. What does that mean? It means he's nervous, which means whatever you uncovered, whatever is on that board behind you, it's enough to threaten him. Francesco's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I need to increase security. I want men stationed inside the apartment, not just outside. And I don't want you going anywhere without at least 3 bodyguards. I'm already a prisoner here, I said, the frustration bubbling over. How is this any different? A living prisoner is better than a dead one. He shot back, then immediately looked regretful. I'm sorry. I don't mean to frighten you. But I won't lose you again. I looked at him, at the fear barely masked by his anger, and made a decision. Then help me remember. Not just the pleasant stories, not just the curated version of my life you think I can handle. Tell me everything. Show me the reports, the evidence, whatever I was working on. If I'm in danger anyway, I have a right to know why. Francesco studied me for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. All right. But not tonight. You need to rest, and I have things I need to handle. Tomorrow, I'll walk you through everything, start to finish. And Faith? He paused at the door, looking back at me. If it gets to be too much, if you need me to stop, say so. Promise me. I promise. After he left, I turned back to the investigation board, studying it with new urgency. Somewhere in this web of connections was the answer to why someone had tried to kill me. And maybe, if I could understand that, I could begin to understand the woman who had been brave enough to fight back. I reached up and touched the photograph of Viktor Kozlov, that cold-eyed man with the cruel smile. He'd tried to kill me once. Would he try again? And if he did, would I be ready? The sun was setting, painting the studio in shades of gold and amber. I looked at my hands, at the wedding ring that caught the light, and thought about Francesco's words. Your body is wiser than your mind sometimes. Was he right? Did some part of me, some essential piece that transcended memory, still know him? Still love him? There was only one way to find out, and that was to dive deeper into the mystery of my own lost life. To face the danger head-on instead of hiding from it. To become, once again, the woman who had looked a monster in the eye and decided to fight. I picked up a pen and notepad from the desk, settling into the chair before the investigation board. If Francesco was going to walk me through everything tomorrow, I wanted to be ready. I wanted to have questions prepared, to approach this like the mystery it was. As I began to write, organizing my thoughts and observations, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't memory exactly, but it was something close, a sense of familiarity, of rightness. This is what I did, I realized. This is how I worked. Methodically, carefully, building a case piece by piece until the picture became clear. Maybe I wasn't as lost as I thought. Maybe the woman I'd been was still here, just buried beneath layers of trauma and fear. And maybe, with time and determination, I could find her again. The question was, did I want to? That woman had nearly gotten killed. That woman had chosen a dangerous life with a dangerous man. Was that really someone I wanted to become again? But even as I asked the question, I knew the answer. Because sitting here, studying this board, feeling the puzzle pieces begin to click together in my mind, this felt right. This felt like me, in a way that nothing else had since I'd woken up in that hospital bed. I picked up a red marker and circled one of the names on the board, someone I'd connected to both Kozlov and Francesco's organization, Mikhail Petrov. I'd written informant next to his name with a question mark. Tomorrow, I'd ask Francesco about him. Tomorrow, I'd start putting the pieces together. And tomorrow, I'd begin the process of either confirming Francesco's love story or uncovering a darker truth. Because as much as I wanted to believe in the romance he painted, in the love story he insisted we shared, I couldn't ignore the small voice in the back of my mind that whispered a warning. What if I'd discovered something about Francesco himself? What if the accident wasn't about Viktor Kozlov at all, but about my own husband? What if the danger came from inside these walls, not outside them? It was a terrible thought, one that made my stomach churn. But I'd been an investigator, apparently. I'd trained myself to look at all possibilities, to trust evidence over emotion. And until my memories returned, until I could truly know what I'd been working on, I had to consider every angle, even the ones that involved the man I was apparently still falling for, despite everything. I looked at the wedding ring on my finger, twisting it around my finger thoughtfully. Trust, but verify. That's what any good investigator would do. Starting tomorrow, that's exactly what I plan to do. Morning came with an unexpected gift, a fragment of a dream that felt more like a memory. Francesco and I in a restaurant, candlelight between us, his hand reaching across the table to take mine. "You're sure?" he'd asked, his expression serious. "Once you know everything, there's no going back." And I'd squeezed his hand, certain and unafraid. I'm already all in. I might as well know what game we're playing. I woke with the echo of those words in my mind, my heart racing. Was it real? Had that conversation actually happened? Or was my brain simply creating false memories to fill the void? There was no way to know for certain. And that uncertainty was perhaps the most frustrating part of all this. Francesco was already in the kitchen when I emerged, making espresso with the ease of someone who'd performed the ritual countless times. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression softened. "You look like you actually slept." "I dreamed," I said, accepting the cup he offered. Or remembered. I'm not sure which. He stilled. "Tell me." I recounted the scene, watching his face carefully for any sign of recognition. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "That was the night I told you the full truth about my family's business. About what I really did. Who I really was. You'd already known I was connected. But that night I gave you details I'd never shared with anyone outside the family. And I stayed." "You stayed," he confirmed. "You said you appreciated the honesty more than you feared the danger. That we all made compromises in the name of love. And this was yours." We stood in silence for a moment, the morning light streaming through the windows. Then Francesco set down his cup decisively. "Are you ready? To see everything?" I nodded, and he led me to his home office, a room I hadn't been allowed to enter yet. It was masculine and elegant, all dark wood and leather, with an enormous desk and walls lined with bookshelves. But what caught my attention was the locked cabinet in the corner. Francesco produced a key, unlocking it to reveal stacks of files, hard drives, and what looked like surveillance equipment. "This is everything you compiled. Your investigation into Kozlov, but also..." He hesitated, then met my eyes directly. "Also your investigation into me." My breath caught. "What?" "You were thorough. You didn't just investigate my enemies. You investigated me, too. Made sure you knew exactly what you were getting into, what sins I'd committed, what blood was on my hands." He pulled out a thick file, handing it to me. "Read it, all of it. Ask me anything." I won't hide from you, Faith. I took the file with trembling hands. Inside were documents I'd apparently compiled myself. Financial records, testimony transcripts, even photographs of Francesco meeting with known criminals. My notes were meticulous, organized by date and severity. I'd cataloged everything: money laundering, protection rackets, even what looked like a suspicious death that had been ruled an accident. "Did you kill this man?" I asked, pointing to a photograph of a body, my voice remarkably steady considering the chaos in my chest. "Yes," Francesco said without hesitation. "He was trafficking children. I gave him a chance to stop, to leave the city and never return. He chose to stay and threatened to expose my family's operations to federal investigators unless I partnered with him. So I removed the problem. That's murder. That's justice in my world. The police couldn't touch him. He had connections, lawyers, money. But he made a mistake thinking I would tolerate what he was doing." Francesco's voice was cold, flat. "I'm not asking you to agree with my methods, Faith. I'm just telling you the truth." I flipped through more pages, each one a revelation, each one a piece of the darkness that apparently existed in the man I'd married. By the time I reached the end, I felt sick. How could I have loved you, knowing all this? Because you saw the whole picture, not just the parts that make you uncomfortable. He moved to a different drawer, pulling out another file. "This is the other half. The community centers my family funds. The businesses we protect from worse predators. The trafficking operations we've shut down. The women and children we've helped escape. It's not redemption, Faith. I'm not a good man. But I'm not purely evil either. I exist in the gray spaces, and you accepted that." I read through this second file, my mind reeling. It was true. There was another side to his operations. Legitimate businesses that provided jobs. Programs that helped at-risk youth. And I noticed significant financial support to several organizations that fought human trafficking. "You're trying to do better," I said slowly, "in your own way. I'm trying to survive in a world that doesn't offer simple choices. But yes, after meeting you, I've tried to mitigate the harm, to use my power for something other than just personal gain." He sat on the edge of his desk, his posture weary. "You changed me, Faith. Made me want to be someone worthy of you." I set the files aside, my head pounding. "And Kozlov? How does he fit into all this?" That's where it gets complicated. Francesco pulled up a series of photographs on his computer, surveillance images of Viktor Kozlov meeting with various people. "Kozlov operates in the same shadows I do, but without any moral boundaries whatsoever. Human trafficking, weapons dealing, drugs, anything that makes money. About a year ago, you found evidence that he was planning to expand his trafficking operation into New York, using some of my family's legitimate businesses as fronts without our knowledge. So I started investigating. More than that, you became obsessed. You saw what he was capable of, the lives he destroyed, and you couldn't let it go." He pulled up more files, these ones showing complex financial networks. "You used your architectural work as cover. Many of the buildings involved in his operation needed renovation or redesign, so you had legitimate reasons to be in those spaces. You documented everything, passing intelligence to both me and to a federal task force that was building a case. I studied the screen, trying to follow the threads of the investigation. It was impressive work, meticulous and clever. This woman she'd been smart, strategic, unafraid to take risks, and he found out." "We think so. 3 weeks before your accident, you told me you'd found something big. You wouldn't tell me what, said it was safer if I didn't know yet. You needed to verify it first, make sure you were right." Francesco's jaw tightened. 2 days before the accident, you met with your FBI contact upstate. You were driving back when someone ran you off the road. The brake lines were cut before you left, probably while you were in the meeting. They wanted it to look like an accident, but our people found the evidence. He turned to look at me directly, his eyes blazing with barely controlled fury. Whoever did this, they knew your route, knew your schedule, which means someone close to you betrayed you. The implication hung heavy in the air. You think it was someone in your organization. I know it was. The question is who. He pulled up another file, this one containing profiles of several men. These are the people who had access to your schedule that day. I've been investigating them, but quietly. If I move too openly, whoever betrayed you will disappear. I looked at the faces, memorizing them. One stood out, Mikhail Petrov, the name I'd circled on my investigation board. Him. I marked him as a possible informant. Francesco's expression grew grim. Mikhail has been with my family for 10 years. His son is godson to my cousin. If he betrayed us, betrayed you. He didn't finish the sentence, but I could see the pain and fury warring in his expression. Maybe I was wrong, I offered. Maybe I was investigating him and found nothing. Or maybe you found exactly what you were looking for, and that's what got you hurt. Francesco closed the laptop, rubbing his face tiredly. This is why I wanted you to stay out of it, why I wanted to protect you from all this. It's dangerous, Faith. People have died for less than what you were uncovering. So what do we do now? Now? Now I finish what you started. I find out who betrayed you and I make sure they pay. The darkness in his voice sent chills down my spine. And you stay here, safe, protected, while I handle it. Absolutely not, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. If this investigation was mine, if I nearly died for it, then I have a right to see it through. You're asking me to put you in danger again. I can't do that. You don't get to decide what risks I take, I shot back, and even as I said the words, they felt familiar, like an echo of an old argument. You said it yourself. I'm my own person. I choose my own battles. Francesco stared at me, and slowly a small smile curved his lips. There she is. There's the woman I married. What? That fire, that stubbornness, that absolute refusal to be protected if it means giving up your agency. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle. I've missed her. Missed you. Even when you were right here. The moment hung between us, charged with something electric. I found myself leaning into his touch, my body responding to him in ways my mind still didn't fully understand. I'm scared, I admitted quietly. Scared of what I'll find. Scared of who I was. Who I might become again. Fear and courage aren't opposites, Faith. Courage is being scared and doing it anyway. His hand moved to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing across my lips. And you've always been the bravest person I know. Before I could think better of it, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. It was tentative at first, testing, but then he responded, one hand sliding into my hair, the other pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, and suddenly I was drowning in sensation. The taste of espresso on his tongue, the scent of his cologne, the solid warmth of his body against mine. And underneath it all, a sense of rightness, of coming home. My body did remember him, just as he'd said. It remembered the shape of him, the way we fit together, the electricity that sparked between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Francesco rested his forehead against mine. You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that again. I think I'm starting to understand, I whispered. We stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, and for the first time since waking in that hospital, I felt certain about something. Whether it was wise or not, whether it was safe or not, I was falling for Francesco Castellano all over again. And this time, I was choosing it with full knowledge of who and what he was. Okay, I said finally, pulling back slightly to look him in the eyes. Okay, let's finish this together. Let's find out who betrayed me and make sure Kozlov can't hurt anyone else. But we do it as partners. Real partners. Francesco studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Partners. But with one condition. You don't take unnecessary risks. We plan everything carefully, and if I say a situation is too dangerous, you trust my judgment. And you trust mine when I say I can handle something. Deal. He held out his hand, and I shook it, the gesture feeling both businesslike and deeply intimate. As I stood there in his office, surrounded by evidence of both his crimes and his attempts at redemption, I realized something important. I might not remember the woman I'd been, might not have access to those 3 lost years, but I was still her. Still that person who looked at darkness and chose to fight it. Still someone brave enough to love a complicated man in a complicated world. The accident had stolen my memories, but it hadn't stolen my essential self. That was still here, waiting to be reclaimed. And reclaim it I would, one truth at a time. The next 3 days were a crash course in my own investigation. Francesco and I spent hours in his office, going through every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence I'd compiled. He brought in Marco, his most trusted lieutenant, to brief me on the organizational structure of both his family and Kozlov's network. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to see the picture I'd been painting before the accident. It was brilliant work, I had to admit with a strange sense of pride. I'd used my position as an architect to gain access to buildings, to meetings, to conversations that most people would never be privy to. I'd built a web of connections, documenting how Kozlov's money flowed through seemingly legitimate businesses, how his trafficking operation worked, how he'd built a network that spanned from Eastern Europe to New York. But it was the file marked "Verification Needed" that caught my attention on the 3rd day. It was partially encrypted, with notes in my handwriting that suggested I'd been protecting the information even from myself. I need to access this, I said, showing Francesco the file. Whatever's in here, it's what I was meeting with the FBI about before the accident. Francesco called in a tech specialist, a young woman named Elena, who looked barely old enough to be out of college, but attacked the encryption with impressive skill. It took her 6 hours, but finally, she cracked it. What we found made everything else pale in comparison. Jesus Christ, Francesco whispered, staring at the screen. You found his entire network. Everything. Names, locations, financial accounts, evidence of at least 47 trafficking operations across 3 continents. But it was the final document that stopped my heart. A list of names under the heading Dirty. Law enforcement officials, politicians, even federal agents, all on Kozlov's payroll. And there, 3rd from the bottom, was a name that made everything click into place: Special Agent David Reeves, FBI. That's who I was meeting with, I said, my voice hollow. My FBI contact. He's the one who betrayed me. Francesco was already on his phone, barking orders in rapid Italian. Within minutes, he had confirmed what we'd suspected. David Reeves had disappeared 2 weeks after my accident. No forwarding address, no contact with the bureau. Nothing. He'd vanished. Kozlov must have paid him to eliminate you, and then eliminated him to tie up loose ends, Marco said grimly. He'd joined us when Elena finished decrypting the files, his expression growing darker as he read through the evidence. This is enough to bring down not just Kozlov, but half of his organization and their protection in law enforcement. And it's why they want Faith dead, Francesco said, his voice like steel. As long as she might remember what she found, she's a threat. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd uncovered. 47 trafficking operations. Hundreds, maybe thousands of victims. And I'd been the one to expose it all. We need to get this to someone we can trust, someone who can actually do something with it. Already working on it, Francesco said. I have contacts in the federal prosecutor's office who are clean. But Faith, you understand what this means? Once we turn this over, you'll have to testify. You'll be the key witness in one of the biggest RICO cases in decades. Without my memories, how can I testify? The evidence speaks for itself. Your testimony would be about how you gathered it, what you observed. And the documentation is meticulous enough that even without your memories, it's damning. He pulled me to face him, his hands on my shoulders. But it also means you'll be in danger until Kozlov is arrested and convicted. Probably longer. I'm already in danger, I pointed out. At least this way, there's purpose to it. Over the next few hours, Francesco made secure calls while I continued to review the evidence. There were photographs that made me sick. Young women in cages, children with hollow eyes, the brutal efficiency of human suffering turned into profit. This was what I'd been fighting. This was why I'd risked everything. It was nearly midnight when something else caught my attention. A surveillance photo of Mikhail Petrov meeting with someone in what looked like a parking garage. The angle was bad, and the other person's face was partially obscured. But something about their stance, their build, was familiar. Francesco, I called out, pulling up the image on the larger screen. Come look at this. He studied the photo, his expression growing darker. That's from 6 months ago, according to the timestamp, right around when you started investigating Mikhail. Who was he meeting with? Francesco zoomed in, enhancing the image as much as possible. When he saw the face, even partially obscured, he went completely still. No, it can't be. Who is it? That's my cousin, Antonio. The words came out strangled. He's been with the family since birth. He's like a brother to me. I pulled up more files, searching for Antonio's name. There. Several more meetings, all documented but never analyzed because I'd been focused on Mikhail. I think they're working together, both of them betraying you to Kozlov. Francesco's hands clenched into fists, his face a mask of fury and pain. Antonio has access to everything. My schedules, my security protocols, my business operations. If he and Mikhail have been feeding information to Kozlov. He didn't finish, but the implications were clear. They could have been the ones who told Reeves where I'd be that day, I said quietly. They could have ordered my death. The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. When Francesco finally spoke, his voice was so cold it sent chills through me. They signed their own death warrants. Francesco, no. We take this to the authorities. We do this the right way. The right way? He turned to me, and there was something frightening in his eyes. The right way got you nearly killed. The right way let traitors into my family, into my home, into my life. There is no right way in my world, Faith. There's only survival. Then I don't want to survive in your world, I shot back, surprising both of us. Not if it means becoming the kind of person who kills without trial, without justice. You said I changed you, that I made you want to be better. So be better. Don't let rage turn you into the monster Kozlov is. He stared at me, conflict warring across his face. Finally, he slumped against the desk, the fight going out of him. What do you suggest? We gather more evidence. We prove their betrayal beyond doubt. Then we give it all to the prosecutors. Kozlov, Antonio, Mikhail, all of it. We let the law handle it. And if they come after you again while we're gathering evidence, then you protect me, like you promised. I moved to stand in front of him, taking his hands in mine. But you don't become a murderer. Not for me. I couldn't live with that. Francesco pulled me against him, burying his face in my hair. You're asking me to show mercy to people who tried to kill you, to family who betrayed everything we stand for. I'm asking you to trust in justice instead of vengeance. There's a difference. We stood like that for a long moment, and I could feel the tension slowly draining from his body. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were clearer, more resolved. "All right. We do it your way. But if they make one move toward you, all bets are off." "Fair enough." The door to the office burst open, and Marco rushed in, his face pale. "Boss, we have a problem. Someone just tried to breach the building's security. They didn't get through, but they left something for you." He held out a manila envelope. Francesco took it carefully, opening it to reveal a single photograph, me, taken through the windows of the penthouse. Sometime in the last few days, maybe even today. Written across it in red marker. "She remembers too much." The message was clear. They were watching. They knew I was recovering, knew I was investigating, and they were preparing to strike again. Francesco's face went hard, all the softness from our conversation disappearing. "Get everyone we trust together. I want this building locked down. I want additional security on every entrance, and I want surveillance footage from every camera within 6 blocks reviewed. Someone got close enough to take that photo, which means they're close enough to try again." As Marco hurried out, Francesco turned to me. "Pack a bag. Essential items only. We're leaving." "Leaving? Where?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere even Antonio doesn't know about." He was already moving, pulling out a burner phone, making calls. "I have a place, off the books. No one in the family knows about it except me. We can work from there, coordinate with the prosecutors, and keep you safe until we're ready to move." I wanted to argue, to insist I wasn't running, but the photograph in his hand was proof enough that staying here was suicide. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe. If they're bold enough to leave that message, they might be bold enough to try something tonight." He grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the bedroom. "Grab what you need. We leave in 5 minutes." As I threw clothes into a bag, my hands shaking, I couldn't help but think about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, before I'd fallen in love with a mafia boss, before I'd started fighting human traffickers, before I'd chosen this dangerous, complicated life. Would she recognize me now? Would she approve of the choices I was making? But even as I asked the question, I knew the answer. Because despite everything, the fear, the danger, the lost memories, I felt more alive now than I had since waking up in that hospital. I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be, even if that person might get me killed. The safe house was a revelation. Tucked away in the Catskills, it looked like an ordinary cabin from the outside, but inside it was equipped with state-of-the-art security systems, encrypted communications, and enough supplies to last months. Francesco had bought it years ago, he explained, long before he met me. A place to disappear if everything fell apart. "You never told anyone about this?" I asked, unpacking in the bedroom while he ran security checks. "No one. It was my contingency plan, my last resort." He paused in the doorway watching me. "I never thought I'd bring someone here. Never thought I'd trust anyone enough. But you trust me. With my life, with everything." He crossed the room, taking the shirt I was folding from my hands and setting it aside. "Faith, I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, if Kozlov or Antonio or whoever else finds us here, I need you to promise me you'll run. There's a tunnel in the basement that leads to the woods, a car stashed half a mile away with cash and documents. You take it and you disappear. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Because you're the only one who can finish this. You're the only one who has all the evidence, who knows the full scope of the investigation. If I die making sure you escape, that's a trade I'll make gladly." I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. "Stop talking about dying. We're going to survive this, both of us. We're going to see Kozlov arrested. We're going to testify. And then we're going to figure out what our life looks like on the other side. You sound so certain. I am certain, because I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me. I pulled him closer, my forehead resting against his. I love you. I don't remember falling in love with you. Don't remember our wedding or our honeymoon or all the little moments that built what we had. But I love you now, in this moment, knowing everything about you, the good and the bad, and all the complicated gray in between. Francesco's breath caught, his eyes searching mine. You mean that? I mean that. And when this is over, when we're safe, I want to build new memories with you. I want to fall in love with you again, consciously, deliberately, with full knowledge of who we both are. He kissed me then, deep and desperate and full of promise. It felt like coming home and leaping off a cliff all at once, terrifying and exhilarating. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I'll hold you to that, he whispered. The next morning, we began coordinating with the prosecutors. Francesco had made contact with Assistant U.S. Attorney Margaret Chen, who had a reputation for being both brilliant and incorruptible. She reviewed the evidence I'd compiled, her expression growing more stunned with each file. "This is extraordinary work," she said via encrypted video call. "Ms. Castellano, you've handed us one of the most comprehensive trafficking cases I've ever seen. With this evidence, we can bring down not just Kozlov, but his entire network." "How soon can you move?" Francesco asked. "We need to verify some of the intelligence, cross-reference with our own investigations. 2 weeks, maybe 3. She looked directly at me. "Ms. Castellano, I won't lie to you. Until Kozlov is arrested, you're in extreme danger. Even after, you'll need protection. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," I said, more confidently than I felt. "Whatever it takes." After the call ended, Francesco and I spent the afternoon going through more files, building timelines, preparing for the moment when I'd have to testify about what I'd found. It was during this review that something shifted in my mind. Not a memory, exactly, but a sensation. A feeling of familiarity. "This room," I said suddenly, looking around. "I've been here before." Francesco went still. "What?" "I've been here. Not recently, but I remember being in this cabin. We were looking at evidence. Documents spread across that table." I pointed to the dining table, and as I did, more details emerged. "You were angry about something, a deal that had gone wrong. And I was trying to calm you down, telling you that rage clouds judgment." "That was 18 months ago," Francesco breathed. "Right after you first started investigating Kozlov. You'd found evidence of a trafficking operation using one of my legitimate properties, and I was furious that someone had violated my organization like that. You brought me here to work through the evidence away from the city, away from people who might be compromised." More pieces were falling into place, not complete memories, but impressions, feelings. We made love on that couch. I gestured to the leather sofa by the fireplace. It was winter. There was a fire burning. And you told me you were afraid of losing me, that investigating Kozlov was too dangerous, and you told me you weren't afraid to die for something that mattered. Francesco's voice was rough with emotion. "You said fear was a luxury you couldn't afford, not when there were people suffering who needed someone to care enough to take the risk." I closed my eyes, reaching for more, and suddenly it was there. A flood of impressions, emotions, fragments of memories. Not everything, not the full 3 years, but pieces, important pieces. "The accident," I gasped. I remember being in the car. I was driving back from the meeting, and I was excited because Reeves had promised to fast-track the investigation. Then the brakes failed, and I was trying to steer, trying to slow down. But there was a truck. It came out of nowhere, and Francesco was there, his arms around me as my knees gave out. "It's okay. You're safe. You're here with me. It wasn't an accident," I sobbed. The truck, it deliberately forced me off the road. I remember seeing the driver's face just for a second. I pulled back, my eyes wide. It was Mikhail. Francesco, it was Mikhail driving the truck. The rage that crossed Francesco's face was terrifying. "He'll pay for this. I swear to God." "No." I cut him off, my voice steadier now. "We stick to the plan. We give the evidence to the prosecutors. We let justice handle it." "Justice?" He laughed, a harsh sound. "Faith, he tried to murder you. My own man, someone I trusted, tried to kill the woman I love. You're asking me to show restraint I don't possess. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust in the system we're trying to support." I cupped his face in my hands. "You said I changed you. Prove it. Be the man I fell in love with, not the monster your enemies are." We stood like that for a long moment, the tension crackling between us. Finally, Francesco's shoulders slumped. "You're going to be the death of my reputation as a ruthless mobster." "Good. Maybe you can build a new reputation as a ruthless businessman instead." He laughed, and this time it was genuine. "You never stop fighting, do you? Never stop pushing me to be better." "Someone has to," I said with a small smile. The following days were a blur of coordination and planning. More memories returned. Not everything, but enough that I began to feel more like myself. I remembered our wedding, small and intimate, in a garden in Sicily. I remembered the first time Francesco told me he loved me, standing on the terrace of this very cabin, the sunset painting everything gold. I remembered the moment I'd discovered Kozlov's network, the horror and determination that had driven me to risk everything to stop him. And I remembered the woman I'd been, brave, determined, willing to sacrifice for what she believed in. That woman was still here, I realized. The accident had hidden her for a while, but she'd never really gone away. 10 days after we'd arrived at the cabin, Margaret Chen called with news. "We're moving tomorrow night. Multiple simultaneous raids across 3 states. Kozlov, his lieutenants, everyone on your list. We'll have teams in position to protect you during the operation." "And Antonio? Mikhail?" Francesco asked. "Them too. The evidence you provided of their involvement in Ms. Castellanos' assault is compelling. They'll be arrested along with the others." After the call, Francesco and I stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. It felt surreal. After all the fear, all the planning, it was finally happening. "Tomorrow this all ends," I said quietly. "Tomorrow, our real life begins," Francesco corrected. "Whatever comes after, testimony, trials, adjusting to a life where half my organization has been arrested, we face it together." "Together," I agreed, lacing my fingers through his. That night, as we lay in bed, I finally told him something I'd been thinking about for days. I want to go back to architecture. Real architecture, not using it as a cover for investigation. I want to design buildings that matter, that help people. "I think that's perfect," he said, pulling me closer. "And I need to figure out what comes next for me. The legitimate businesses can sustain us, but I need to extract myself from the shadows. For you, and for the man I want to be. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." He kissed my forehead. "But we'll figure it out. We always do." The next evening, as federal agents swarmed into locations across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, Francesco and I watched on encrypted monitors from the cabin. We saw Viktor Kozlov led out in handcuffs, his cold eyes blazing with fury. We saw Antonio and Mikhail arrested, their faces pale with shock. We saw justice, finally, for all the victims whose suffering I'd documented. When it was over, Margaret Chen called personally. It's done. 43 arrests total, with more expected as we process the evidence. Ms. Castellano, you're a hero. You've helped save hundreds of lives. I just did what anyone should do, I said, but I felt pride warming my chest nonetheless. That's where you're wrong. Most people look away. You looked closer. She paused. We'll need you to come in for debriefing in a few days. Start preparing for testimony. But tonight, enjoy the victory. After she hung up, Francesco pulled me into his arms. You did it. You brilliant, brave, impossible woman. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have finished this without you. He tilted my chin up, his eyes intense. Faith Castellano, will you give me the honor of letting me fall in love with you again? Fresh start, new memories, building something even stronger than what we had before? I smiled, my heart full. Francesco Castellano, I think I'd like that very much, but on one condition. Anything. We do it honestly. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Whatever comes, we face it together in the light, not hiding in shadows. I can live with that. He kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. In fact, I think I'd like nothing more. As we stood on that porch, wrapped in each other's arms, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the accident that stole my memories, the fear and confusion of waking up to a life I didn't recognize, the slow process of rediscovering myself, of choosing to love this complicated man in this complicated world. I'd lost 3 years, but in losing them, I'd found something more valuable. The freedom to choose my life consciously, deliberately, knowing all the risks and choosing anyway. To love Francesco not because I didn't know better, but because I knew exactly who he was and loved him regardless. The woman I'd been had chosen him once. The woman I was now chose him again. And this time, I'd remember every moment of it.